Morning, brethren. Well, as we mentioned yesterday at the close of our daily devotion, we're going to go back this morning to Hebrews chapter 12 and verse number 1. And we're going to look at the second let us that we find in that verse. The verse reads as follows: Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely. The let us lay aside every weight there, that let us also applies to the second part of the phrase. Let us lay aside every sin which clings so closely. We saw that this was a picture painted for us by the apostle of the Grecian Games. The athletes coming into the sporting arena, they take off their long overgarment, their toga. And as you know, that garment went all the way down to almost the ankles. And if you tried to run in that, it would have got tangled up in your legs. And before you know it, you'd have fallen flat on your face and wouldn't been able to win the race or to get on well in the race. And so the apostle says that they are not only to lay aside every weight, things that in and of themselves are not sinful, but would hinder you. He says they are also to lay aside every sin that is closely entangled, or every sin which clings so closely. The King James Version of this is the sin that so easily entangles us. The picture, of course, is getting entangled in round the legs and so causing one to stumble or to fall. There are certain sins, in fact, all sin, that would in any way hinder us, that we must abandon. Whenever a person begins a Christian life, they soon learn that things that they had been doing have to be given up if they are going to make spiritual progress. They begin to recognize things as sinful, and because they're sinful, they must be laid aside. Before I became a Christian, I was very much given to gambling and to the consumption of alcohol to access getting drunk, in other words. Very early on in my Christian life, I realised that these were things that had to be given up. I knew that I had to overcome my tendency towards gambling. It was like a long overcoat whenever one was trying to run a race. You just couldn't make progress in the race if you're going to keep this overcoat on. Flowing in the wind would have slowed you down. It could have tangled up your feet. And so it had to be laid aside. It was a sin to gamble. And by the grace of God, I was able to lay that aside. Other things, of course, like taking God's name in vain, making sure that you watched and guarded your tongue, foul language, which was part and parcel of being a teenager in Belfast back in the 70s, that had to go. All those things were things that would have hindered me in my Christian life. Drinking, of course, to access to the point of drunkenness, that went as well. There are many sins that can so easily entangle us. Sin of jealousy, the sin of pride, the sin of sexual lust, the sin of covetousness. So many of these things that we need to look at and cast aside because they so hinder us in the Christian life. In churches, one of the things that it is so important to get rid of, if we are to make progress in our lives and help others make progress in theirs, is the sin of selfishness. All of us have a tendency to want our own way. We want things to go our way, get what pleases us, whether it's from a very small, insignificant seeming thing like the colour that we paint the church building, to something that is perhaps viewed as being more important, the calling of a minister. We'll only vote for the person that we want. And if the congregation don't go for that person, then our nose is put out of joint, and maybe we'll not even vote for that person or support that person. We'll go and we'll attend some other church. Brethren, these are things that we must lay aside. These are things that we must get rid of. Such sins as selfishness, pride, jealousy, gambling, drinking, deceitfulness, all these things must go. They will hold us back from making progress in the Christian life. So the apostle says, let us lay aside every weight, things that in and of themselves aren't sinful, but which will undoubtedly hold us back, and let us lay aside the sin that so easily entangles us and trips us up. Brethren, take these two let us passages, think about them, think about what things you need to lay aside, what weights and what sins, and get rid of them so that you are able to run the Christian race as well as you can. May God help you to do that. And God willing, tomorrow we'll return to this verse to get another lesson from the let us of this passage. May God bless you today.